Dear listeners, there is struggle in the world between democracy and authoritarianism. From time to time, this struggle takes the form of wars, including world wars. Now there is a war between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. It increasingly pulls the surrounding countries into its orbit. It may happen that a world war breaks out between the two systems. Such a war can also reach a nuclear character. What will be the relationship between these two systems in the future? Which system will win? There are many examples that testify to the imperfection of these two systems. Authoritarianism has certain advantages in the speed of decision-making and discipline. The disadvantages of an authoritarian system are the faster depletion of human resources due to violence and exploitations, as well as the likelihood of making erroneous decisions due to the exclusion of the broad masses of a population from governing the state. There is a lot of talk about wars, terrorism, the Holocaust, genocide, crime. Increasingly large sums of money are being spent on the fight against terrorism and crime. But no one can say how to prevent this at present or in the future. I have tried to scientifically develop effective methods that only they will be able to eliminate the threats of terrorism and reduce crime. Terrorism, wars, genocide, crime can be eliminated. I have come to the conclusion that there is such an understanding as spiritual evolution. Each spiritual type of man exists in the form of civilization, culture. Biological evolution in human society has been replaced by spiritual evolution. Spiritual evolution has been going on in human society all along. As a rule, each spiritual species of man has a separate spiritual doctrine, religion, worldview, and more. For example, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, free society, other less visible cultures. There is fiery struggle between separate spiritual species on people, civilizations, which obey to the laws of biological evolution. That is, the disappearance or oppression of one spiritual species and the flourishing of another. The struggle in human society has replaced by the struggle of languages, religions, laws, and ideologies. Spiritual evolution took place and is taking place now in a similar way to biological, along with the physical disappearance or self-isolation and conservation of the representative of a weaker spiritual species culture. The mechanism of this is mainly the lack of means for a normal life, resources, energy, food, good quality water, material values, knowledge, technology, low level of medicine, epidemics, etc. It is interesting that nowadays this struggle basically has nothing to do with blood kinship of people. The struggle between civilizations sometimes takes cruel forms, namely wars, genocide, the Holocaust, terrorism, some form of crime, piracy. The reason of this is spiritual isolation, the lack of mutual spiritual penetration of one civilization into another. I want to say that there is another form of this struggle when two cultures exist in the same territory. This struggle is based on the imaginary of well-founded suspicion of some representatives for others, in the form of the fact that perhaps one party parasitizing on the other, seeking obtains legitimate power over another, or not supporting the common acquisition of representative of other culture. And this mistrust from time to time manifests itself in outbreaks of violence and criminality, which sometimes take terrible form of genocide. Historically, there have often been conflicts between them. There were ideological guidelines that were hostile to other cultures. There were other reasons that were proved irresistible. If cultures are mutually permeable, they find a common language and peacefully coexist for a long time. It is worse when there are some heavy barriers of mutual penetration. Interpenetration of cultures promotes dragging on one or another party. Many countries are on a verge of different cultures. For example, the Republic of the former Yugoslavia, Ukraine has also not completely avoided such a situation. A free society currently best reconciles different cultures in one territory. Freedom of religion and worldview, free transmission of information, human rights, social guarantees, fairly developed gender emancipation have led to the fact that the states of the free world have already gotten rid of the internecine wars that haunted these countries in the past. They open the way to a wealthy life. In order to protect everyone from terrorism and at the same time from serious crime, which are connected to each other, it must be done on the basis of the following actions. It is necessary to accept that valuable spiritual assets of the countries of the free world that they have accumulated in recent decades. It is necessary to give the opportunity for individual cultures to develop freely. And this possibility, while preserving the interpenetration of ideologies and cultures, should give individual cultures the right to certain frameworks of isolation that will not violate the basic principle of the free world, but will ensure the followers of different cultures. To give the opportunity to every culture located in the same territory, the right to a certain self-isolation, agreed by legislation, to ensure the possibility of free development of each. If we cannot avoid spiritual evolution, since it is a law of existence embedded in the very nature of human development, that why can't we avoid such terrible and wild manifestations and phenomena of it as wars, genocide, terrorism, crime? It is solidary responsibility that is not only a special measure that can overcome the complicated problems and contradictions of the modern world, but will also be an indicator of the special spiritual kind of modern people. It will abolish completely not only terrorism as a world phenomenon, but also serious criminality. Everyone knows that a human is not only an individual, but also a social being. We are all connected to each other by work, life, cultures, interest, economy, power, and much more. Everyone's mistakes are reflected in our surroundings. Objective circumstances, independent of us, forced us to pay for the consequences of violations committed by our surroundings. Then I will touch only on the most important aspects of the introduction security against terrorism and other criminal activities. They have a novelty which is as following. First, introduce solidary liability in accordance with the law. Second, introduce a new system of 7 sentences. Third, introduce the concept of ideological responsibility. Only the use of such methods of actions can lead to a radical change in the fight against terrorism and crime. Solidary responsibility. What's it for the phenomenon? This is when children take simplified responsibility for their parents, when they commit serious crimes, and parents take it for their children. Other persons should also be responsible for each other to some extent. The responsibility for the activities of terrorists, especially suicide terrorism, should be borne by his family in accordance with the law by restricting the territory of their permanent residence or by deportation. Only solidary responsibility for loved ones will be able to stop extremists and lead to a gradual extinction of terrorism. Solidarity responsibility will not be a violation of human rights, because it can be waived or voluntarily assumed. The world must be divided somehow. It is pity, but to defeat crime, terrorism, genocide, wars, and many other bad things, the world must be divided. Temporarily, but extremist people need to be fenced off, and this must be done without violating human rights. People will be divided together with their territories of residence and economic activity. The world will be divided into the territory of voluntary solidary responsibility and the territory where there will be no such solidary responsibility. That is, everyone together with their territory will enter one or another part of the world. People will be able to move freely from one part to another, accepting the order and laws of another. Many territories will remain in joint use. The regime for violators of territorial restriction can be very liberal, conditional in the absence of legislative acts. Demarcation will only be voluntary. Restrictions cannot be applied to the territory chosen by the citizen, including his own territory of residence and economic activity. Assistance will also be provided for a person to acquire the qualities needed to move into the zone of solidarity liability. At the same time, persons who also they assume solidary responsibility but do not comply with other legal or moral laws, lead to a parasitic lifestyle, may be deprived of the main solidary responsibility and must be separated together with their own territory of residence and economic activities. Having solidarity responsibility will become a privilege and a pride. Each spiritual group, we will call it a social group, will have the right to some self-isolation in the form of setting barriers of physical interpretation on the basis of the generally accepted principles and legislation. The limitation between different social groups can be undertaken on the basis related to the solidarity responsibility. Solidarity responsibility will become the main characteristic of belonging to a new culture, a certain social group. Every social group culture has the right to free development, to freedom, to security, which cannot be complete without creating certain barriers between them. True security cannot be without solidary responsibility. As a result of implementation of the proposed reforms, will disappear distrust each other, will disappear causes mutual struggle and crime. I believe that a new community of being formed in the world, a new spiritual kind of modern man, the basis of which will be voluntary solidarity, responsibility, and some other features. It will be a community of people with voluntary solidarity, responsibility. It will be not only a new community, but also a new spiritual species of people. Solidarity responsibility will become the basis of a new culture, a new spiritual species, a new civilization. Civilizations with solidarity, liability, will continue its spiritual evolution in the struggle for a happy existence without wars, genocide, terrorism, criminality, deception, and the decline of morality. People need to compete and persuade each other, not physically fight each other. There are things that we will talk further, and they are the only things that connect each person with the surrounding world. This is law, freedom, and property. To completely deprive a person of at least one of these things means to deprive of his human dignity. Depriving a person of love, freedom, or ownership is similar to depriving him of life. All people have the right not only to life, but also to freedom, which cannot be taken away from anyone. How to build a system of 7 sentences so as to restore justice and not degrade human dignity? After all, if we do not deprive a person of life, then we must give him the possibility to return to society for a normal life. And this is possible only if we do not take away human dignity from a person who has become a criminal and do not deprive him of his connection with society. How then to carry out a fair punishment? What is it? To achieve all this, it will be enough to limit the living space of the offenders. It is a term of limitation of freedom and space, and that will be quite enough. The book I wrote highlighted new principle of life, new attitude to punishment for crimes. These proposals will not only lead to a fair punishment, a sharp reduction of crime, but will also have a huge economic impact. As a result, cost for maintaining order will be reduced many times. The above mentioned principle and proposal will be quite interesting, although they will create a lot of work for law enforcement agencies. After all, this principle and proposal will need to be materialized into current legal norms and laws. Their implementation will free up huge funds for the modernization of economy. What are the new principles of punishment for crimes proposed to implement? Their essence is as follows. Prisons as building must be abolished. Persons serving sentences must be saved from criminal injury and dying off of their ability to lead normal and fulfilling life in freedom. The world has a system of punishment that violates the fundamental principle and human rights that have been given to us from birth. All people have the right not only to life, but also to freedom, which cannot be taken away from anyone, just as you cannot take away from anyone the right to love, the right to property. A free society does not limit complete freedom for everyone only within their own territory and living space. It is trying to ensure full freedom on the territory of the entire state. Can we all really take advantage of this opportunity? We are citizens who are busy with their affairs in a certain territory, work, leisure, study, everyday life, entertainment within certain limited territorial boundaries. We don't really need to whole territory of the state. The free territory of an entire state, complete freedom of movement, access to every citizen is needed only by the criminal world. These are to whom the free world has given complete freedom. These are criminals, terrorists, extortionists, thieves, persons who are trying to enslave us spiritually. Everyone has the right to self-defense of himself, his family, his property, his state. The state is the body that should organize and mainly undertake these actions. The state will also have to implement those new principles of justice that I spoke about earlier. What other threats exist to all this? If the enemy is obvious, then it is clear who to fight and from whom to defend. It is more difficult when the enemy is secret. They can be terrorists, corrupt officials, thieves, criminal ideology, etc. Thank you for your attention.